In some sports, being on the shorter side is advantageous. Hockey is not one of those sports.
A height differential here coming from the side as Landeskog.
While being small, quick, and elusive can have its benefits, they are few and far between when most players are big, quick, and elusive. And while you can always put on some weight, you can't just put on height. It's a very physical game. You're gonna get body checked. And it's easier to both dish out and receive body checks when your head isn't being hit every time you do so. Even when there's nothing specifically dirty about the hit, your dome is just in the range of fire when you're on the shorter side, as you can't expect someone who's almost 7 feet tall to drop down to their knees to hit someone who's almost 6 feet tall. It's just part of the unfortunate reality of being on the shorter side in the sport. Not to mention it's easier to move others or to throw them off their game in general when they're on the smaller side, and it's harder to be thrown off your game or be moved whatsoever when you're bigger. So it's no secret that size is important in the NHL. Teams like big players. Around 80% of current NHL players are 6 feet or taller. Most NHL players fall within the 5'10" to 6'3" range, and that entire range is above average height in almost every country on the planet. Height can do a lot for a player's chances of making the league. Certain teams, training staffs, and the players themselves, occasionally, one way or another, end up bumping up the recorded heights to make players more attractive hockey assets to potential trade partners or for franchises looking to draft them.
You're listed at 5'10", right? Now, you 5'10" or 5'8"?
5'10's generous.
Okay.
No, I'm nowhere near 5'10.
Okay.
Probably 5'7 to 5'8.
Okay, well, listen.
I don't know who put me down at that.
If they didn't, it's likely many of them would have been passed over entirely without being given a chance. So obviously some players may be smaller than their listed heights. Therefore, we can take some of these recorded heights with a grain of salt and assume not all, but some players are shorter than reported. But nevertheless, from what history can tell us, going off of the official NHL records and documents, what are the chances of making the NHL as an undersized player? Obviously, you need to develop a ton of talent, put in a ton of hard work, and have a passion for the sport to get anywhere near the NHL regardless of size. But let's face it, since hockey is a very expensive sport to play, it often ends up weeding out and favoring the wealthy and talented from the simply talented pretty early on. Unlike many other sports, these days, outside of a couple outliers and a fair few Russian players, not many players make it to the pros when they were near or below the poverty line. Artemi Panarin's got quite the story, so I'll link an article in the description if you're interested. But yeah, while particularly wealthy families aren't absolute necessities, as stories of players making the NHL from humble beginnings do exist, they are quite rare. Top-of-the-line equipment can make a big difference in high-level youth hockey, and getting any equipment whatsoever is expensive. More importantly, you need to have parents or guardians who are able to afford the fees and time to travel, and then you'll start competing with kids who have access to ice and hockey camps just about all the time.
Hockey's supposed to be our country's sport, but fewer and fewer Canadian kids are playing it.
Of course, outside of very serious world issues,
Please, no more war,
the all-around greed from equipment companies and league organizations are the main factors that have led to minor hockey registration numbers declining year after year, with many potential hockey players now favoring more easily accessible and affordable sports. So obviously, the odds are against the majority of kids with NHL dreams right off the bat, especially if you were born outside of Europe or North America. North Americans make up the majority of the league. Around 70% of NHL players in 2024 are from Canada or the USA, and just about the entire rest of the league is from Europe. There's only 2 current NHL players that sort of aren't European or North American. Nathan Walker, who's from Australia and represents them internationally but was born in Wales, and Arthur Kaliev, who was born in Uzbekistan but moved to the US when he was 2 and represents the US internationally. And even if you are from Canada or the US, broadly speaking, studies suggest that out of every person who plays minor hockey in North America, 1 out of 4,000 or 0.025% of kids who play minor hockey will have a steady NHL career, and only 1 out of 1,700 or 0.058% will even play in one NHL game. The most likely route for anyone to make it onto an NHL team is through the NHL draft. Since 2005, there's been 7 rounds in the NHL draft, but there has been as many as 25, which was the setup back in 1974. Around 65% of first-round picks play in the NHL, around only 25% of second-round picks, around only 12% of third-round picks, and below 10% of fourth-round picks and beyond. So it may even be more rare than it seems to actually play in the NHL regardless of height. You have to sacrifice a lot, you have to overcome a lot, and you have to have a lot go your way to make it to the league. But along with all that, genetics do indeed help. As of the 2024 NHL draft, 12,753 players have been drafted, but 75 from way back in the day don't have height information recorded, so we can't count them for this study, which brings us down to 12,678. So, how likely is it that you'll be drafted if you're below average height?
He's got some work to do, but his release and the power on his shot for a little wee guy, amazing.
First, what is average height? Again, most NHL players are from North America, where the average height for men is around 5'9", and basically all the rest of them are from Europe, where the average height is around 5'10", 5'11". 774 players were drafted at or under the average North American height. And 5'9" is still considered quite small for the NHL. But still, we're looking for people genuinely below average human height across the globe. So let's take a look at the worldwide average. The country with the tallest average men is the Netherlands, where 6 feet tall is average. The country with the shortest average men is Timor-Leste, where 5'3" is the average. And most databases consider the worldwide average for men to be around 5'7". Sure, the worldwide average height is, for lack of a better term, brought down by many countries who don't produce many, if any, hockey players at any level, but plenty of countries outside of North America and Europe have decent amounts of people playing hockey, and some do make it to the NHL.
From Ust-Kamenogorsk, Kazakhstan, Nikolai Antropov.
But no matter where you're from, making it to the NHL being 5'7" or shorter is very difficult and is thus very rare. Again, 12,678 skaters with recorded heights have been drafted.
Small stature, but it's extremely quick.
Some of those shorter players may still play at least one NHL game sometime as they were recently drafted, but for most of them, it's very unlikely. As of right now, only 69 players have been drafted who were at or under the worldwide average height of 5'7" at the time they were drafted, which means 0.54% of all draft picks have been below average human height. Only 23 were 5'6" and shorter, only 4 were 5'5" and shorter, and only 1 was 5'4". But after all, if you do end up getting drafted as an average or below average height player, you still have to overcome the odds to actually play in the NHL. Just ask Ken Hicks, who was 5'7" when he was drafted 3rd overall by the Oakland Seals in 1967, but never played an NHL game. How many of those picks who were at or under average height when they were drafted actually played in the NHL? 2 out of the 3 first-round picks, all 5 second-round picks, 5 out of 9 third-round picks, and 15 out of 52 fourth-round picks and beyond. Yet, there are more undersized players today than in most recent chunks of history, but still not many in comparison to the 1930, 70, or 80 seasons and adjacent years, where there was far and away the most undersized players. Currently, there are only 47 players in the NHL who are shorter than 5'10", 15 players shorter than 5'9", and while being average North American height is becoming a little more common in top-level hockey, it's never been more rare to be average human height in general and play in the NHL. And though he's been playing for the Cleveland Monsters this year so far, Trey Fix-Wolansky played 11 games for the Blue Jackets in 2023-2024, where he was the only player in the league listed at 5'7". There have been 108 NHL seasons, and if Trey Fix-Wolansky or any other players listed at 5'7" don't play in the NHL this year, it'll be the first year in the entire history of the league that not a single player was listed at 5'7" or shorter. Though remember, recorded heights can get bumped up. But still, if many players are given an inch or so boost on paper, then this could mean that there's no 5'6" players, or legitimately shorter than average human height players for the first time ever. And though you don't have to be 6'4" to be considered a highly touted prospect anymore, which was the case for many people in the 90s, like just about every other sport, being big and having all kinds of freak athletic ability is heavily sought after. Nevertheless, despite how unlikely it is, there clearly have been players who were drafted and undrafted who made the league against the odds that their physical stature provided. While the chances of not being drafted and making the league are very slim, even more so if you're on the shorter side, it has happened, and occasionally those undersized and undrafted players have great careers. At 5'9", Jonathan Marchessault went undrafted, but also went on to win the Conn Smythe Trophy for playoff MVP when the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup.
The first undrafted player to win the Conn Smythe since Wayne Gretzky.
And he was the only player on the team who was under 6 feet tall. As of the start of the 2024-25 season, 7,699 skaters have played at least one game in the NHL. And of those 7,699, 1,196 have been undrafted. Only 114 of those have been 5'9" or under, and only 10 have been 5'7" or under. But those players did it completely against the odds. Of all skaters who have played at least one game, only 395 have been 5'9" and below, only 156 have been 5'7" and below, only 65 have been 5'6" and below, only 12 have been 5'5" and below, and only 1 was 5'4", which was Nathan Gerbe, making him the shortest NHL skater ever. Here's a couple wild photos of Nathan Gerbe and Zdeno Chara, who was the tallest player ever. It's hard to believe they played in the same league in a full contact sport, isn't it? Gerbe was also the second shortest player of any kind ever. As goaltender Roy Waters, who played in the NHL from 1925 to 1937, was 5'3". You might notice I haven't talked much about goalies. That's because you pretty much have no chance at the NHL if you're on the shorter side these days, as goalies are only getting taller and taller and taller.
The 6'7" goaltender will get the call for the Maple Leafs here this evening.
Nashville Predators goalie Jussi Saros is the shortest goalie in the league, and he's 5'11". There hasn't been a below-average height goalie in over 20 years. The last truly undersized goalies were 5'8" Artur Surbe and 5'7" Fred Brathwaite, who last played in the 2003-2004 season.
Oh my, do you believe that?
And if you're of average human height or below and you want to play at least one NHL game, essentially your only chance at the NHL is being a skater. And in order to do that, you'll have to be part of the 0.05% of minor hockey players who make it to the NHL by being part of the 0.54% of players who were drafted at or below that height, or by being part of the 0.83% of players who made it to the league at that height despite being undrafted. But hey, some shorter players do make it and make great livings, and some even become fan favorites because of the extra skill, efforts, tenacity, speed, and heart they have to display and utilize to make and stay in the league.
It looks to me as if it's the 1,000-game man, Brian Gionta.
There's always those skeptics, and I just always wanted to show that through hard work and the way I played the game that I could make it at the next level.
And of course, to many fans, those players could be the most physically relatable, while some smaller players even ironically stick around specifically for their physical play. And being smaller could have its advantages from time to time, as difficult to endure as they may be.
Sometimes they have to take penalties that they wouldn't have had to take against the bigger guys.
Oh, and he caught Brian Gionta with the stick.
In the end, no matter how unlikely it may be, it is still possible. Maybe someday, someone will even make it against the odds as an undersized goalie. Leave your thoughts on all this in the comments, along with your favorite undersized players ever. And if you or your kids are on the shorter side, but love the game and have aspirations of playing high-level hockey, whether you think making the NHL is realistic or not, for the good of the sport, don't let height stop you from playing, or enjoying the game, or hanging on to the dream as long as you'd like.
I mean, there's a picture of me when I was, I think, 5 years old playing against a 10-year-old kid. And I think he was, I'm not even joking, 1.5 foot or 2 feet taller than me. I was the smallest player on my team at every single level.
Again, though they may be few and far between, whether they were drafted or not, some players who were at or below North American average or human average height had consistent and successful careers playing NHL hockey, completely against the odds. Exciting fans and inspiring many other players who didn't have height on their side along the way. Some even dominated the game with 100-plus point seasons.
Pass in, right in angle, score!
Rebound. Kings with it beyond. He scores into the open net. Marcel Dion. He's in. Goal. Fake goal for Mike Rogers.
Under with it. Dilla has it now. Works it right in front. They score! Dennis Maroon.
He's in. Neil Broughton a breakaway. Right in shooting. He scores! What a feed from Dino Ciccarelli to put Neil Broughton in alone.
Curvers. Oh, le but! 40e de l'année. 40e but pour Mats.
Traffic there, stuck out by Lube, a shot, scores!
Lube is a talented player, there's no doubt about that.
I said, ain't it grand to be first? There's Mullen, scores! Mullen on a harmless-looking play. Blue line, he was trying to get at the puck, out in front, they score! Fleury!
And some good hustle by Gilmore, and of course, Fleury.
Line, Brad Richards now. A one-timer chance, they score! Shallowy with a hammer shot to tie it. Brad Marchand in for a chance, tugged a bit, wrap around, he scores! What a goal! Brad Marchand! Puts it in deep for Kachuk. Backhand pass in front, Gaudreau scores! Johnny Gaudreau gets his 40th of the season.